If a woman tells you these 5 things, you need to stop what you're doing and walk away immediately. Sounds harsh, right? But trust me, ignoring these red flags will only lead you down a path of frustration, disappointment, and unnecessary heartache. Relationships are supposed to bring growth, trust, and respect. But when a woman says certain things, it's a clear sign that respect is missing, and you're dealing with someone who may not have your best interests at heart. Recognizing these signs early can save you from years of emotional turmoil, wasted time, and energy that could be better spent on someone who truly values you. Now, let me be clear. This isn't about hating women or generalizing. It's about protecting yourself from toxic relationships that can leave you questioning your worth. Too many men have sacrificed their confidence, happiness, and even their goals to try and make a relationship work with someone who didn't respect them from the start. And all too often, it's because they ignored early signs. Simple things a woman might say that should have immediately told them to walk away. In this video, I'm going to share 5 specific things a woman might say that should make you do just that. Turn around and walk away without hesitation. No second chances, no trying to fix things. These phrases aren't just casual statements. They reveal a mindset that can trap you in a toxic dynamic. If you're tired of wasting your time on relationships that drain you, if you're ready to spot the signs before it's too late, then stay with me. What I'm about to share could save you from months or even years of frustration. Let's dive in. Men often ignore red flags in relationships, and it's easy to understand why. Society has conditioned many of us to believe that we should stick it out, endure difficult situations, and prove our worth, especially when it comes to romantic relationships. There's this idea that relationships require sacrifices, and sometimes those sacrifices end up being the respect, happiness, or even sanity of the person making them. Men feel pressured to tolerate toxic behavior or dismiss early signs of trouble, thinking that they can fix things or change the dynamic over time. But what they don't realize is that ignoring these red flags isn't a sign of strength or commitment. It's a sign of fear or insecurity. Emotional manipulation also plays a big role in why men tend to stay in unhealthy relationships. Sometimes women subtly manipulate men into thinking that their concerns or boundaries are unreasonable, making them feel guilty or unworthy for wanting more from the relationship. This emotional pull can make a man overlook or ignore red flags, believing that the problem lies within him rather than with the unhealthy behavior of his partner. It's a vicious cycle that can take a toll on self-esteem and make a person question their own needs and desires. Think about real-life situations where men stay in toxic relationships despite clear signs that things aren't right. Maybe it's a man who ignores emotional neglect because he's told that relationships are hard work, or another who overlooks manipulative behavior because he feels obligated to prove his love. These scenarios are all too common. And the sad truth is, by the time they realize what they've been ignoring, it's often too late. They've invested too much emotional energy to walk away, or they feel trapped in a cycle of unhealthy attachment. The purpose of this video is to help you recognize these signs early on before they consume too much of your time, energy, or emotions. By learning to spot these red flags early, you can avoid unnecessary frustration and protect your well-being. You deserve a relationship where you're valued, respected, and appreciated, not one that drains you or makes you question your worth. So, let's break down these warning signs and learn to walk away when we see them. One of the most dangerous phrases you can hear from a woman early in a relationship is, "I don't need a man." At first, this might sound empowering or independent. After all, who doesn't want a partner who is self-sufficient and strong? But when you dig deeper, this phrase carries significant implications about how she views men, and more importantly, how she might treat you in the future. When a woman says, "I don't need a man," it can reveal that she sees men not as partners, but as accessories or perhaps even as obstacles in her life. She might think of herself as strong, independent, and perfectly capable on her own. But this type of mindset often comes with an underlying assumption that she doesn't need to respect or appreciate a man because she doesn't view him as a necessary or equal part of her life. In relationships, mutual respect and appreciation are essential. When she says she doesn't need you, it can be a signal that she doesn't value your role in her life in the same way she values her own. Independence. The mindset behind this statement is often tied to previous experiences or a distorted view of relationships. Some women may have been hurt in past relationships and, as a defense mechanism, have convinced themselves that they don't need a man to be happy or fulfilled. Others may have been influenced by cultural narratives about feminism or independence, but they may have taken it to an extreme where they see men as unnecessary rather than equals. While self-reliance is important, relationships are about partnership and support. Saying, "I don't need a man," implies that men are only there to serve a purpose for her. And that's not a healthy foundation for any relationship. Let's consider a real-life example. Imagine a man who meets a woman who tells him early on, "I don't need a man." At first, he might admire her confidence and independence. He might think that she's strong and doesn't rely on anyone, which seems like an attractive trait. But over time, as the relationship develops, he begins to notice her dismissing his opinions, disregarding his feelings, and even belittling his contributions. She's not seeking his support or input because in her mind, she doesn't need him for anything. Eventually, the man finds himself in a constant battle for respect, trying to prove his value, but she continues to minimize him. What started as an attractive trait, her independence, becomes a toxic dynamic where she refuses to acknowledge his worth as a partner. What this really means is that a woman who doesn't need a man will likely fail to respect or appreciate him. She might take him for granted, expecting him to be there without reciprocating the same level of care, effort, or respect. Relationships are built on give and take, but when one partner doesn't recognize the value of the other, it creates an imbalance. The man will likely end up feeling unimportant, overlooked, or even disrespected, which can lead to frustration and a lack of fulfillment. So, what should you do when you hear this phrase? Walk away. I know it sounds harsh, but if a woman is already stating that she doesn't need a man, it's a huge red flag. It signals that she may never truly value you for who you are and what you bring to the table. A healthy relationship requires mutual respect, understanding, and partnership. If she doesn't need you, she's unlikely to treat you like a valuable part of her life. And for your own self-respect and well-being, you deserve someone who recognizes the value of a loving, supportive relationship. Don't settle for less, especially when you've already been given a warning. The sooner you walk away, the sooner you can invest your time and energy into a relationship where both partners appreciate and support each other. Another phrase that should raise immediate red flags is, "My ex was toxic." On the surface, it might sound like she's just venting or trying to explain her past relationship struggles. But when this becomes a constant theme in her conversations, it reveals a dangerous pattern. Blaming an ex for everything that went wrong in a past relationship is often a way of deflecting responsibility. This phrase can be a sign of someone who refuses to acknowledge their own mistakes or behavior, which makes them a ticking time bomb in a new relationship. The psychological reason behind constantly blaming an ex is that it allows a person to avoid taking any personal responsibility for their actions. By labeling the ex as toxic, she avoids looking at her own role in the relationship's failure. It's much easier to point fingers than to reflect on one's own shortcomings. Unfortunately, if she's unable to see or admit the role she played in her past relationship, she's likely to repeat the same mistakes in a new one. Without accountability, there's no room for growth. And if she can't own up to her part in the breakup, she'll continue to make excuses and shift the blame onto others. What this phrase really hides is a deeper issue. By blaming her ex, she's refusing to face the reality that maybe her own actions contributed to the breakdown of the relationship. Perhaps she ignored red flags, didn't communicate properly, or even treated her ex poorly, but instead of learning from the experience, she's clinging to the idea that the ex was entirely at fault. This refusal to take responsibility is not only damaging to her personal growth, but it's also toxic for anyone who gets involved with her. If she can't admit her role in the failure of her past relationship, she never truly understands what went wrong, and she's bound to carry that same attitude into your relationship. Let's look at a real-life example. Imagine a man who's dating a woman who repeatedly mentions how terrible her ex was. She talks about how he was controlling, selfish, or emotionally abusive. While it's important to listen and support a partner who's gone through a tough time, it becomes problematic when she constantly compares the new man to her ex. Over time, the man may start feeling like he's being held to an impossible standard, constantly hearing about how her ex was so toxic, and how she never wants to deal with that kind of person again. But no matter what he does, he always seems to fall short because he's being measured against a past relationship. This dynamic creates a toxic pattern where the man feels unappreciated and disrespected, especially when she's not allowing him to be seen for who he is. It erodes trust and undermines any chance of building a healthy, respectful connection. If you find yourself in a situation where a woman constantly brings up how toxic her ex was, it's time to step back and assess the situation. This behavior isn't just about her past. It's about her inability to take responsibility for her actions and her unwillingness to move forward in a healthy way. You shouldn't have to compete with an ex, and you certainly shouldn't be dragged into a cycle where you're constantly being compared to someone who may or may not have treated her poorly. The bottom line is that a person who doesn't own their part in a failed relationship will likely repeat the same patterns in future relationships. If she's using her ex as an excuse for her behavior, it's a clear sign that she's not ready for a mature, balanced relationship. The best thing to do in this situation is to walk away. Don't waste your time or energy on someone who's not willing to acknowledge their own flaws or mistakes. If she's still stuck in the past, blaming her ex for everything, she won't be able to fully invest in you or your relationship. Relationships are built on accountability, trust, and growth. And if she's not willing to take responsibility for her actions, then it's better to move on before you get caught up in a toxic cycle. Another red flag that should make you walk away immediately is when a woman says, "I want a man who can handle me." At first, this might sound like she's expressing confidence, as if she's proud of who she is. But in reality, this phrase is a huge warning sign, signaling that she views relationships as a challenge or game rather than an equal partnership. What she's really saying is that she wants someone who can tolerate her chaotic behavior, mood swings, and emotional roller coasters. And that is not a healthy foundation for any relationship. This phrase sets the stage for a power struggle in the relationship. When a woman says she wants someone who can handle her, she's not necessarily looking for a balanced, respectful connection. Instead, she's essentially saying that she expects the man to put up with her behavior, no matter how erratic or difficult it might be. Instead of working together to build a healthy partnership, she's setting up an expectation that the man will be the one to absorb her emotional turbulence and deal with it, while she doesn't take responsibility for her actions or attitudes. This dynamic can quickly turn toxic, because it's based on the idea that the man is there to manage her emotions, rather than for them both to share in the responsibility of creating a loving, stable relationship. What's even more concerning is that this statement often serves as a manipulation tactic. It's a way for her to test the man's patience and see how far she can push him before he either gives in or loses his own sense of self. This isn't about her trying to work through her own issues in a constructive way. It's about her wanting to see how much he'll tolerate before he reaches his breaking point. And in the process, she gets to feel validated when he handles her, even though this isn't a healthy, sustainable dynamic. Over time, this emotional manipulation can become emotionally draining, because it places an unfair burden on the man. Rather than being in a partnership of mutual respect, he's constantly forced to manage her emotions, which is exhausting, ultimately unhealthy for both people involved. Consider this real-life example. Imagine a man who enters a relationship with a woman who frequently says things like, "I just need someone who can handle me." At first, he thinks she's being playful or simply expressing her personality. But over time, he starts to notice that she has outbursts over small things that shouldn't cause such a reaction. Maybe she'll lash out if he's late, or she'll give him the silent treatment if he doesn't agree with her on something trivial. Instead of discussing her feelings in a mature and constructive way, she expects him to handle the fallout from her behavior. As time passes, the man begins to lose his sense of self. He feels as if he's walking on eggshells, constantly wondering how he can avoid triggering her next emotional outburst. He sacrifices his own boundaries just to keep the peace, and the relationship becomes more about him managing her volatility than building a genuine connection. Slowly, he loses his own sense of identity, and the power dynamic shifts in a way that's damaging to both of them. If you find yourself in a relationship where the woman is constantly using this phrase, "I want a man who can handle me," take it as a clear warning. This is not the foundation for a healthy relationship. It's a sign that she's not interested in growing with you or sharing in a balanced, respectful partnership. Instead, she's looking for someone who will endure her chaos, which will only drain you in the long run. Relationships are about mutual respect, emotional growth, and support, not about tolerating each other's worst behaviors. The best thing to do when you hear this phrase is to walk away immediately. If she's expressing that she wants someone to handle her, she's already indicating that she doesn't take responsibility for her actions or emotions. This dynamic will only lead to frustration, emotional exhaustion, and a loss of respect for both parties. Relationships should be about balance, not control. And if she's setting up an expectation where you have to manage her emotional instability, it's time to move on. Don't fall into the trap of thinking you can change or fix someone who views relationships this way. It's not your job to handle her chaos. and you deserve to be in a relationship where both people contribute equally to building a healthy, loving environment. If a woman ever says, "You're insecure for thinking that," it's a huge red flag that you should not ignore. This phrase is a classic example of gaslighting, a manipulation tactic that is designed to make you doubt your own feelings, thoughts, and perceptions. Gaslighting happens when someone manipulates another person into questioning their reality. And when a woman uses this phrase, she's doing exactly that. By telling you that you're insecure for raising a legitimate concern, she's dismissing your feelings and making you feel like you're overreacting, even though you're simply expressing a valid emotion or concern. What makes this even more dangerous is that it targets your self-confidence and emotional stability. The goal of gaslighting is to make you question your own judgment and begin to feel unsure about what you know to be true. It's a psychological tactic that slowly erodes your sense of self-worth, causing you to doubt your instincts. If you start second-guessing your feelings and thoughts because she tells you that you're insecure, it puts you in a position where you stop trusting yourself, and that's incredibly damaging to any relationship. This phrase also serves to silence healthy boundaries. When you raise an issue in a relationship, it's a natural and necessary part of communication. But when a woman responds by saying, "You're insecure for thinking that," she's essentially shutting down any form of healthy discussion. Instead of addressing the issue at hand, she deflects and makes you feel like you're the problem. This tactic prevents you from expressing yourself openly and creates an environment where your feelings are dismissed as being unreasonable or invalid. Over time, this can make you feel unheard and emotionally drained, as if your concerns don't matter. Consider this real-life example. Let's say a man notices that his girlfriend has been texting someone a little too frequently, and he expresses his discomfort about it. Rather than addressing the issue maturely, she responds by saying, "You're insecure for thinking that. It's just a friend, and you're overreacting." Immediately, his feelings are invalidated, and instead of discussing the situation, the conversation is now about him being insecure. This shifts the focus away from the real issue, which is her behavior, and instead makes it all about him being the one at fault. The more this happens, the more he starts to question his own feelings. He wonders if he's really overreacting or if he's just being insecure, even though his concerns were valid to begin with. What this behavior reveals is a lack of respect for the man's perspective. When a woman consistently uses this phrase, she is showing that she doesn't value your thoughts, emotions, or boundaries. It's a form of control, as she manipulates the situation to make you feel as if your feelings don't matter. She's more focused on protecting herself and deflecting any accountability than actually addressing the issue. This creates a toxic dynamic where your voice is constantly being silenced, and you're left feeling powerless in the relationship. If you encounter this kind of behavior, it's crucial to trust your instincts and walk away. A relationship should be a space where both partners feel comfortable expressing themselves and addressing concerns without fear of being dismissed or belittled. If a woman uses gaslighting tactics like saying, "You're insecure for thinking that," she's not engaging in healthy communication, she's shutting it down. No one deserves to be in a relationship where their feelings and concerns are invalidated. If you find yourself constantly questioning your own thoughts or feeling like you're the one in the wrong for having valid concerns, it's time to step back and reassess the situation. Don't let anyone manipulate you into doubting your own worth or instincts. Walk away from any woman who uses this tactic to control the conversation and avoid addressing real issues. You deserve to be in a relationship where your voice is heard and respected. If a woman ever says, "Other men want me," it's a huge red flag that should not be ignored. This phrase is a classic manipulation tactic designed to provoke jealousy, insecurity, and competition within the relationship. By mentioning other men, she is seeking validation and attention from people outside the relationship, while also trying to test how much you care or are willing to compete for her affection. It's a form of emotional manipulation that can make you feel inadequate or like you need to constantly prove your worth to her, even though you should never have to compete for someone's love and respect. At its core, this statement is about control. When she says, "Other men want me," she's attempting to provoke a reaction from you. It's a way of making you feel jealous or insecure, which puts her in a position of power. The more she can trigger these emotions, the more she controls the dynamic between you. It's emotionally draining and creates a toxic atmosphere where you're constantly worried about losing her or not being enough, even though the problem lies in her manipulative behavior. Rather than fostering a healthy relationship based on trust, love, and mutual respect, she's more focused on playing emotional games and keeping you on edge. Consider this real life example. A man is in a relationship with a woman who often drops comments like, "I had so many guys hitting on me today," or "I can't believe how many men find me attractive." At first, he brushes it off, thinking it's just a casual remark. But as time goes on, he begins to feel an underlying tension. He starts comparing himself to these other men, wondering if he's doing enough to keep her attention or to prove that he's worthy of her. This constant emotional manipulation makes him feel insecure, and he starts investing more energy into trying to compete for her affection rather than focusing on building a healthy, balanced relationship. Over time, this dynamic erodes his self-esteem and self-worth, leaving him feeling emotionally drained. What this reveals is a deeper issue within the relationship. The woman is using other men as a tool to manipulate her partner into proving his love and worth. By mentioning other men, she's indirectly telling you that your attention, effort, and devotion may not be enough, and that she's still seeking external validation. This creates an unhealthy dynamic where the man feels like he's in constant competition, not just with other men but with his own insecurities. The root of the problem isn't the other men. It's the way she is using them to make him feel inadequate or to fuel her own ego. If you ever encounter a woman who uses this kind of emotional manipulation, it's essential to walk away immediately. No one deserves to be in a relationship where their worth is constantly questioned or where they're manipulated into competing for someone's attention. A healthy relationship is built on trust, mutual respect, and the understanding that both partners value each other. If a woman needs constant validation from outside sources or uses jealousy as a way to control your emotions, she's not fostering a healthy relationship dynamic. Instead, she's manipulating you into feeling insecure for her own gain. You deserve a relationship where your worth is never in question, and where your feelings are respected, not used as pawns in a game of emotional control. If you find yourself constantly worried about losing her to other men, or feeling like you need to prove yourself to keep her interested, it's time to walk away. Trust your instincts and remember that emotional manipulation has no place in a healthy, loving relationship. Let go of the emotional games and find someone who values you for who you are, not someone who needs to make you feel insecure to get the attention she craves. So, to recap, the 5 red flags that should make any man walk away immediately are: first, when a woman says, "I don't need a man." This statement reveals a lack of respect and can set up an unhealthy dynamic where your worth is never truly valued. Second, when she constantly blames her ex for everything. If she can't take accountability for her own actions, it's a sign of toxic behavior. Third, when she says, "I want a man who can handle me." This sets the stage for power struggles and emotional manipulation. Fourth, if she tells you, "You're insecure for thinking that," it's a clear manipulation tactic meant to make you doubt your own feelings and concerns. Lastly, when she says, "Other men want me," it's a form of emotional manipulation designed to provoke jealousy and insecurity, giving her control over your emotions. The importance of self-respect in any relationship cannot be overstated. A high-value man understands that he deserves respect, honesty, and love. He doesn't tolerate disrespect, manipulation, or emotional games from anyone, especially not from a partner. You have to stand firm in your boundaries and never settle for a relationship where you're not valued or appreciated. A healthy relationship is based on mutual respect, and if you're not getting that, it's time to move on. Remember, your time and emotional energy are precious. Don't let anyone waste them on unhealthy dynamics. Prioritize yourself, protect your peace, and always trust your instincts. Never feel obligated to tolerate toxic behavior, no matter how charming or persuasive the person may seem. Walk away from relationships that drain you and make room for one that nurtures your growth and happiness. You deserve the best, so don't settle for anything less.